Good evening. You're watching the main news on ATV. I'm Heyling Chan.
And I'm Reese Sim. Here are tonight's top stories.
Blind activist Chen Guangcheng's American dream begins.
Ma Ying-jeou sworn in for second term as Taiwan president.
Zhang Yuxing continues to defend move to end filibustering in LegCo. After years of detention and a bold escape to the U.S. Embassy in Beijing, blind mainland activist Chen Guangcheng is now in the U.S. to start a new life.
Chen said Beijing had dealt with his situation with restraint and calm, but he raised concerns about reprisals against relatives he left behind. More than 22,000 mainland postgraduate students arrive in the U.S. each year, but none come with the drama and diplomatic baggage of Chen Guangcheng. Accompanied by his wife, Yuan Wei-jing, the blind activist took his first tentative steps into a new life in America. He still needs crutches after he broke his foot in a dramatic escape from house arrest last month. Supported by the man who plotted his escape from China, veteran NYU law professor Jerome Cohen, who offered him a fellowship there, Chen addressed dozens of supporters who had turned up to greet him outside the university housing building where he'll live with his family. The man who caused a diplomatic crisis when he turned up at the U.S. Embassy in Beijing last month seeking refuge thanked American and Chinese officials for how the situation had been resolved.
对于他们的帮助，美国使馆还有美国政府给我的帮助，我表示非常的感谢，也希望今后继续的得到他们的帮助，并且，中美的这个协议，还有中国中央政府给我的一个保障我公民权利和自由安全的这样一个承诺。 并不会因为我离开中国而结束，它是一个长期的没有时效的一个承诺，所以我也希望大家不断的去监督这个承诺的履行。
The self-taught lawyer also claimed that acts of retribution may not have abated in his home of Shandong. The village of Dongshigu, where Chen's mother and other relatives remain, is still said to be under lockdown.
对于中国政府在这件事情上处理这件事情上的克制与冷静，我也感到非常的高兴。我希望中国中央政府继续的这个解放思想，深入的推进政治体制改革，实事求是地维护社会的公平正义，取得更多民众的信任。
An emotional young supporter who said she was from Shandong wanted to hug him and give him some flowers, but Chen's security guards put a stop to that. Chen did promise his admirer there would be time for him to meet her again. The White House said it was pleased a resolution was reached and praised Beijing for allowing the activist to visit the US.
We're pleased with the efforts that have been made within our own government, by the State Department, and with Chinese authorities and with Mr. Chen to reach this resolution.
But Republican Congressman Chris Smith, who greeted Chen at the airport, said this was just the beginning.
I think that this is just a page that's being turned because so many other human rights defenders, especially the other Chens, especially those who helped Chen Guangcheng obtain his freedom. So this is a call to redouble our efforts on behalf of human rights in China. Anyone who says, now we can relax, just the opposite. We now have to redouble our efforts for those left behind.
Women's rights activist Reggie Littlejohn didn't hide her feelings about Chen's arrival, which she described as a great day for freedom, claiming he can be more effective from the US.
This is the most exciting day of my life. Chen Guangcheng is the Gandhi of China. He is up there with Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, one of the great personalities of the 21st century, and it is a great honor and blessing that we have him now in the United States.
NYU spokesman John Beckman said once Chen had settled into his surroundings, he would work with Professor Cohen.
Mr. Chen is a special student in law at NYU.
Here in Hong Kong, there were mixed reactions to Chen's arrival in the US.
I mean, to help other people escape from their own country, to me, it's not a right thing. Chinese government doesn't go to the US and do the opposite, right? So Chinese government doesn't go to Britain to help their people who think they're in the house arrest to escape. So why should the U.S. government do that?
Well, I think I'm surprised that it ended so kind of smoothly in the end. I think a lot of people were worried that it would show either aggression on China's part or poor decision-making on the U.S. part. In the end, it seemed to work out kind of fine.
Chen's arrival was the latest stage in an extraordinary journey from rural Shandong province, where he campaigned for thousands of victims of forced abortions and sterilizations under the country's one-child policy that has been funded in part by the United Nations Population Control Program. Chen was jailed for 4 years in 2006 for disrupting traffic and damaging property. He was placed under house arrest after his release in 2010. Astonishingly, the blind activist gave the authorities the slip one night a month ago and turned up in the US Embassy in Beijing on the eve of a visit by US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Initially, he agreed to leave because of assurances made by the central government, but fears for his family and distrust of the authorities forced him to change heart and ask to be allowed to move to America.
Taiwan President Ma Ying-jeou stressed the importance of maintaining peaceful cross-strait ties as he takes office for a second term today.
But the re-elected president was greeted by thousands of opposition supporters who protested against utility hikes and surging inflation. ATV's Raymond Young reports.
After months of preparation following his re-election in January, Taiwan President Ma Ying-jeou was finally sworn in today for his second term in office. Cannons were fired outside the presidential palace in Taipei as Ma was handed the official seal. In his inauguration speech, he quickly applauded the achievements of his administration, saying his team had created the most peaceful state of cross-strait relations in 60 years. Ma then went on to outline his agenda, which included economic development, boosting employment, lowering carbon dioxide emissions, promoting culture, and nurturing and retaining talent. And then there was the usual touchy subject of cross-strait development. Our cross-strait policy must maintain the status quo of no unification, no independence, and no use of force, and promote peaceful cross-strait development whereby each side acknowledges the One China, Two Areas principle, Ma said. He also urged Beijing to squarely face up to this reality, seek common ground while respecting differences, thus providing the basis for both sides' long-term development and safeguarding security. Ma hailed what he said was progress in Taiwan for promoting democracy, and he hopes to see more citizens participating in mainland politics, as well as improvements in human rights and the rule of law, values that he thinks both sides should share to forge closer ties. While the speech seemed to have made many promises, the opposition wasn't impressed. Thousands of protesters, many of whom belong to the rival Democratic Progressive Party, gathered outside a station in Taipei. Scuffles broke out between the protesters and police as they tried to stop vehicles from passing. Others were dissatisfied with Ma's failure to tackle surging inflation amid times during the recession, and the recent rise in petrol and electricity prices only added fuel to the fire. Some vented their frustration by pelting Ma's portrait with eggs. This man urged Ma to immediately step down, saying he has done nothing to ease the hardship of the people with the price of everything going up. Meanwhile, this man is worried that Ma is too close to Beijing and fears Taiwan will be ruled by Beijing one day. In a press conference after the ceremony, Ma admitted some of the policies the government put forward failed to win public support and vowed to make adjustments with his new cabinet. Raymond Young, ATV News.
Executive Councillor Bernard Chan says he hopes the next council will include representatives of various sectors and not just those from business and finance.
Chan said he's not been asked to stay on as a councillor, but has been approached by the incoming administration about his interest in public office. Arthur Kyola reports.
While everyone is wondering who will be part of incoming Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying's cabinet when he takes office in July, there's also the question of who will take positions in the Executive Council. One of the current councillors, Bernard Chan, said on the radio today that he hoped the next council will be made up of more social welfare, environment, and cultural representatives, and not just those from the business and financial sectors. Chan said so far he has not been asked to join the next council. But he did say he was approached by Leung and asked what his interest was in public office. Chan, who is the chairman of the Council for Sustainable Development, said he was interested in assisting the government, but not full-time. Meanwhile, Security Secretary Ambrose Lee became the latest official to declare that he will not be joining the next administration. Lee explained that after 38 and a half years of service, it was time to take a break and spend more time with his family. He did say that he supported his colleagues who would continue to serve in office and hope for a smooth transition to the next administration. Lee also spoke on the controversy of Vice Premier Li Keqiang's visit last August, saying he did not believe the police deliberately obstructed media coverage of the event and stressing that the media has always been considered a friend of the force. Arthur Akiola, ATV News.
Legislative Council President Sang Yok-sing today continued to defend his move to end filibustering by the Pan Democrats.
Former LegCo President Andrew Wong called Zhang's move unwise. Bo Leung reports.
The spotlight hasn't stopped shining on Legislative Council President Sang Yok-sing since he decided to end filibustering by radical lawmakers in the chamber last week. Today, he denied making conflicting statements about why he ended the marathon debate on the controversial by-election bill. The LegCo president said lawmakers from neither the Pan-Democrat nor the pro-government camps raised any issue with him regarding the debate. Once again, he dismissed accusations he had conspired with lawmaker Philip Wong on the move. He added that one lawmaker did speak to him after the marathon debate, but that was only to ask about when the meeting would resume. Zhang also said one Pan-Democrat lawmaker shook his hand after the debate ended, but he doesn't know why.
I have the support of one part of the legislature. They have very strong support, who have categorically expressed their views that I have done the right thing. In the streets, I have similar support. At the same time, of course, I'm aware that there has been a stream of invective aimed at me, both from within LegCo members and from the public. But this is the political reality in Hong Kong.
Former LegCo President Andrew Wong said Zhang should have handled the situation in another way.
I said on the very first day that it was very unwise for the president to assume the power to end the debate after the debate of so many hours. He should have allowed Mr. Philip Wong to move a motion to stop the debate and to put the question to the vote.
Zhang's decision to kill the filibuster after 30 hours was slammed by the Pan-Democrat camps. Radical lawmakers began the time-wasting tactic in their attempts to block the passage of the bill, aiming to stop legislators who resign from running in by-elections for 6 months. Bo Leung, ATV News.
Still to come on ATV's main news, G8 leaders hail their plans for growth in Europe.
And Chelsea beat Bayern Munich in Champions League final.
Four men have been arrested as part of a police crackdown on drugs in bars and clubs in Tsim Sha Tsui. Officers raided a bar on Hillwood Road late last night and confiscated 1 bag of cocaine and some ketamine. The bar owner has been detained. The operation was part of a police crackdown on drug trafficking.
Hong Kong residents are in for the opportunity of a lifetime to watch a solar eclipse tomorrow morning.
But first, in a roundup of local news, concern groups for the disabled staged a rally today, asking for more support from the incoming government. Raymond Young reports.
Dozens of members of various concern groups for the disabled held a rally today. They are calling for Chief Executive-elect Leung Chun-ying to stick to his election promise and provide more support, such as cheap fares on public transport and an employment scheme. This man said the government should try to improve people's daily lives, rather than wait until people are driven to the streets to complain about their problems. The group went from Statue Square to Leung's office in Central, where they handed in a petition. Around 400 passengers were left in limbo after the peak tram broke down today. The rail service was suspended at 11:30 this morning after a system failure. Technicians boarded the tram to inspect the carriages. Some only found out about the interruption when they arrived at the station in Central and had to get the bus instead. Services resumed at 4:20 p.m. An annular solar eclipse will take place above Hong Kong early tomorrow morning. The rare event, in which the sun, moon and earth align, was last seen in 1958. For around 3.5 minutes starting at 5:40 a.m., the sun will be partly blocked by the moon, leaving only a bright ring in the sky. Observatory officer Wu Wengchen said people who missed the spectacle will have to wait another 308 years until it happens again. But he warned people not to look directly at the sun, even while wearing sunglasses, as the sun's rays are too bright and can damage eyes even during an eclipse. The Space Museum is organizing a guided observation tour on the promenade at Tsim Sha Tsui tomorrow morning. Raymond Yang, ATV News.
At least 20 people were killed in an explosion inside a motorway tunnel that was being built in Hunan province. The blast occurred at around 8:30 this morning on a road linking Yanling and Rucheng counties. A vehicle carrying 288 kilograms of explosives was being unloaded inside the tunnel when some of it went off. 24 workers were in the tunnel, but only 4 were pulled out alive, and one of them is in critical condition. Authorities are investigating the cause of the explosion.
A group of 8 leaders meeting in the US have agreed on the way forward to tackling Europe's economic crisis and, in particular, how to keep Greece in the Eurozone.
Leaders of the world's top industrialized nations also discussed Iran, putting the world nuclear watchdog on standby over claims it's developing atomic weapons. Hosted by the US, the Group of 8 summit in the state of Maryland saw world leaders finally come to an agreement on how to deal with Europe's debt crisis. They've come up with a plan they believe will balance the implementation of long-term austerity measures and the introduction of short-term stimulus for continued economic expansion.
Today we discussed ways they can promote growth and job creation right now, while still carrying out reforms necessary to stabilize and strengthen their economies for the future. We know it is possible.
A growing sense of urgency that action needs to be taken, contingency plans need to be put in place, and the strengthening of banks, governments, firewalls, and all of those things need to take place very fast.
Key to doing that, they say, is to keep Greece out of trouble. After political parties fail to form a coalition government, fresh elections will be held next month, which has sparked concerns that Athens won't stick to the austerity measures it previously agreed to for bailout. Fears of Greece's exit from the Eurozone are rife.
We agreed upon the importance of a strong and cohesive Eurozone and affirmed our interest in Greece staying in the Eurozone while respecting its commitments. Of course, we also recognize the painful sacrifices that the Greek people are making at this difficult time.
Also discussed at the G8 summit was Spain's economic health, after 16 of its banks had their credit ratings downgraded earlier this week. France's new president, François Hollande, suggested using European funds to inject capital into Spanish lenders, which would mark a significant acceleration of EU's rescue efforts for the debt-crippled nation. Besides agreeing on giving more money to the banks and less to Europeans, Iran was also discussed by the G8 leaders. They raised the stakes by putting pressure on the country, hinting they were ready to tap into emergency oil stockpiles if the tough new sanctions threaten to decrease supplies, although countries like India, China and Russia are ignoring the Western ban. The tariffs were imposed over claims Tehran is building atomic weapons, despite little evidence.
We are unified when it comes to our approach with Iran. I think all of us agree that Iran has the right to peaceful nuclear power, but that its continuing violations of international rules and norms and its inability thus far to convince the world community that it's not pursuing the weaponization of nuclear power is something of grave concern to all of us.
Several recent media reports have quoted Western and Israeli officials as saying the U.S. is ready to strike Iran at a moment's notice. And in an unusually blunt move, the G8 leaders said they've put the UN nuclear watchdog on standby.
Looking ahead to the likelihood of further disruptions in oil sales and the expected increased demand over the coming months, we are monitoring the situation closely and stand ready to call upon the International Energy Agency to take appropriate action to ensure that the market is fully and timely supplied.
The mention of stockpiles has raised suspicions that other big oil producers like Saudi Arabia may be running short of extra capacity to further boost oil output.
A strong earthquake rocked a large part of northern Italy today, killing at least 4 people and destroying buildings. The quake struck at 4:04 a.m. local time in the plains near Modena and measured 5.9 on the Richter scale. One of the dead was working a night shift in an old factory that collapsed. Rescue teams have been sent out to check reports of people being buried under rubble. Many of the damaged buildings were historic landmarks in rural areas. The last major earthquake to hit Italy was a 6.3 quake in L'Aquila in 2009 that killed nearly 300 people.
Sport news, Chelsea have taken possession of the Champions League trophy after beating Bayern Munich 4-3 on penalties. The match ended 1-1 after Bayern's Thomas Müller headed in a goal in the 83rd minute and Didier Drogba equalised 5 minutes later. The odds were against Chelsea as they had never won a penalty shootout in Europe and Bayern had never lost one. Plus, the German side were at home taking the spot kicks in front of their own fans. After the match, it was back to the hotel to celebrate. In tennis, Novak Djokovic will face Rafael Nadal in the final of the Italian Open. Earlier on, that's our main news for Sunday night. I'll have an update in an hour. I'm Heyling Chan.
And I'm Anne-Marie Sim. The weather report is next. Thanks for watching ATV. Good night.
Good night.
Welcome back. If you were out and about today, you might have been caught up in the showers and thunderstorms. Temperatures ranged between 26.1 and 30.7 degrees, and the relative humidity varied from 73 to 95%. Winds were light. Checking on the ultraviolet reading, the maximum recorded for the day was 10, and tomorrow's UV levels will be about 9. Here's a look at the weather around the region. Thunder and showers are affecting the coastal areas of Guangdong. And moving on to the satellite images. We can see a band of clouds covering the northern part of the South China Sea. And here's the outlook for the next few days. More showers and thunderstorms are expected tomorrow. Temperatures will range from 25 to 29 degrees. Turning fine on Tuesday with the mercury hitting a high of 29 degrees again. Sunny with the odd shower for the remainder of the week and a top temperature of 30 degrees. Let's check how polluted tomorrow will be. General stations will be medium to very high at 40 to 110 and roadside pollution levels will be high at 65 to 95. Now let's look at the weather in cities around the world. That's the latest on the weather. Thanks for watching and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Chosen as one of China's top 10